I want to challenge a few things. First thing, isn't it true that many countries control territories that they do not fully annex? America's got a lot of them, including Puerto Rico. Yeah, people have alternative. There's not every place that you control. I would say Judea and Samaria are Israeli territories. Yes, we have not annexed them fully yet. On the way to, we've already put in 500,000 upward to 1 million of Israeli citizens living in these parts. I live in Gush Etzion, very normative part of Israel. You're right; it has not been fully annexed, but we do buy property here. We do pay taxes here. I mean, we are living in Israel for all intents and purposes. We're not living in the West Bank. We live in Judea. It has not been fully normalized yet. It's a territory. People live in Puerto Rico. People move to Puerto Rico to get better tax status. Okay, so there is alternatives to this very kind of square. It's either yes or no. No, there are gray zones in this world sometimes because of political expediencies. And also the other thing is there's another gray zone in this world before total equality. There's residency. There are other ways to deal with people living in your land. I was in America. I was a resident for many years. Yes, it's true that I became naturalized later on. That's besides the point. There is a status that's not necessarily an equal status. For example, Puerto Ricans. Puerto Ricans are not fully United States citizens because they do not vote for president and they do not vote for voting congressmen and senators. They vote for non-voting congressmen and senators. So even in the great United States, dealing with a landmass called Puerto Rico, which brings no danger to America, has alternatives. The democracy is it's like WordPress. It's fungible. You could play around with it. It's just a basis, an idea. It's not like it's not a god. It's not, you don't have to adhere to every rule. We're a minority. We're living here as a protectorate. We're not here like a regular country. We're a total tiny minority within a giant majority. If we allow total equality, then we'll be overrun from within. Why allow that? And Arabs themselves always tell me, we understand that you don't want to give us total equality. We understand that. Give us residency. If I want a total equality, I'll go to Jordan or whatever it is. So why does it have to be this very, I would say like Madison on steroids? Like it has to be like that, even though it's not like that in America.
So first of all, I love that people take the case of Puerto Rico and compare it with like 330 million Americans. So first of all, it's actually not a good thing and not a good example. And a lot of the problems there emerge from the fact that people are not equal and do not get to vote. This is not an ideal for me. It's not something that I aspire to. And I'm not, like you said, these are none of it of God is from God. Nothing is from God. It's all from humans. And I want to live in a human society where humans have equal political power if they agree to contribute equally. And at the minimum, they have the path to equal political power. I agree. We have a different vision of where we want to live in. And again, with all due respect, Israel, the West Bank is not part of Israel. Israel engages in all kinds of games to pretend and to allow people who live there, some of them, to pretend as if they live in Israel. A government essentially fell because Naftali Bennett was too chicken to call out that lie. But at the end of the day, I believe that Israel should abide by a vision that I call first sovereignty, then settlement. And I think this is the proper way to operate in a joint political entity. The people who vote need to convince people that they're right. You think that we should annex part of or all of the West Bank? By all means, go ahead and convince people of the fact that this is a correct vision, convince people of the vision that some people will remain without any path to citizenship ever. Go ahead and convince them of that. But before you have convinced the Israeli public, there should be no settlement in the territory before it is part of Israel. My policy is first annexation and only then settlement.
I mean, that's a nice idea, but that's not the way it worked out, is it? Right? The way it worked out is that.
Why I think it's a problem. I think the settlement.
It might be a problem, but you can't, you're not going to kick out 500,000 people to make that vision work out.
That does not share its vision. I think it exactly circumvented the Knesset because it knew that it could not convince the Israeli public of its vision.
No. Today, the overwhelming majority of the Knesset believes in Jewish right in Judea and Samaria. So we didn't circumvent the Knesset.
I mean, go and annex it.
I agree with you. That's a problem at the prime minister's level.
And
if you ask,
do that,
how many,
until you do that,
Dr. Einat Wilf, how many, if you asked the Knesset today, the 120 members of Knesset, how many would vote today for annexation? 70, 80 out of 120?
Depends of what? Depends of, again, annexation of what territory, under what conditions, what does it mean if you're annexing 4% of the West Bank, probably you could get a vast majority for that. If you want to annex 100% of it, then you'll have to answer the question of what happens to the Arabs who live there. Do they have a path to citizenship or not? But all I'm saying is that these are questions that should be fully debated, voted on in the Israeli Knesset, and not forced upon the Israeli public by underhanded means. If you think that there could be a vote for annexation, then go ahead and push that vote. What I'm saying is that the claim that people support something, but never putting it to the test, is the problem.
I would love for the Knesset to vote. By the way, I want to make sure that everybody that's listening to this right now understands a few things. I have tremendous respect for Dr. Wilf. I think she's doing, as we say in Hebrew, avodat kodesh, holy work out there and fighting for Jewish rights. I think that what you do out there, Dr. Einat, is especially your explanations of indigeneity. For example, one thing that I've learned from you, and one of my rules is to try to give credit to intellectual ideas. One of the ideas that I love that you say is to explain to people that indigeneity is when, it's your idea, that when indigeneity, and I'd love for you to explain it some more, indigeneity is when your whole culture is tied in to your land. And you explain that the very dates of our holidays, of our major holidays, are agrarian farming dates related to the seasons of the land of Israel. Our very Judaism is related to the land of Israel. So, I'm a big lover of that. So I just don't want people to misunderstand that the disagreements that we have about the so-called West Bank, Judea, and Samaria are indicative of a broader disagreement. You're a Zionist and a leader. However, when it comes to this thing, even my friends, when they heard that I was about to interview you, said to me, ask her these questions because we don't understand her thinking all the way. Because if you're going to talk about indigeneity, as my wife Malka always says, Judea and Samaria, Hebron, Bethlehem, Bethel, Beitel, Jerusalem, these are the indigenous parts of the land of Israel. It's Tel Aviv, etc., the coastal plain, which is the settlement, which is the kind of nouveau thing. The original Israel, the real heartland of Israel, the real indigeneity is here in Judea and Samaria. The fact that our kind of secular state that forgot what the Jewish history really is about and didn't want to deal with the lots of Arabs that are here and kind of relegated to somebody else's problem, and instead brought an evil terrorist regime to rule Judea and Samaria, and then teach the world that there's this thing called Palestine in our land, in our heartland. That doesn't work. And the language that you're saying out there, if an anti-Semite would be listening right now to the things that you said a minute ago, he'll say, you see, Israel's not about to give equality, and therefore this should be a Palestine there. And then they're saying that there should be a Palestine in Hebron. A Palestine in Hebron means there should be a Palestine in Tel Aviv. And that's the lack of the logic. If you could talk about indigeneity and the holidays, wouldn't you want to talk about indigeneity in the cities that these holidays took place in, 2,000 and 3,000 years ago? There's to many people on my side, when they hear you, they sense a disconnect that there's some kind of, we'll call it for the sake of argument, a kind of secular disconnect. And you say about yourself, you're an atheist and stuff like that. It's like it only reaches a certain logical point and then it stops because it seemingly can't handle taking it all the way. Was that did I lay that out fairly? I just want to make sure that I said that fairly to you, and that I want everybody to understand that, we're talking within a lot of agreement, the disagreement that's within that agreement.
Certainly, and I think it's a good opportunity to highlight the disagreement because I think it's very fundamental to Zionism. So first of all, I'll give the credit to where it's actually due. It's Ben Freeman who wrote a great book called The Jews and Indigenous People. And Ben is who taught me that if you look even at the legal definitions of indigeneity, it's not about living in a place. So if Arabs have lived for a very long time in Shechem or in Hebron, that's not what indigeneity is. It's not just living in a place for a long time. Indigeneity is defined really as having your entire culture, the way you mark time, calendar, idioms associated with a particular place. And in that, the Jewish people are almost the indigenous people because the entire Jewish marking of time, the holiday, the language is shot through with the connection to the land of Israel. So, and in that is completely true. Where does Zionism actually, in my view, become I would say, smarter and more connected and therefore more successful, is that with Zionism, given that Zionism was not just an abstract kind of longing. When people tell me Zionism is a 3,000-year-old movement, I'm like, no. The connection between the people of Israel and the land of Israel is millennia old, continuous, uninterrupted, woven into the Israelite, Judean, the Jewish civilization. But the idea of turning that connection into a political program for sovereignty begins in the 19th century and very much emerges from ideas of self-determination, responsibility. Now, if we emerge from a moment from our navel-gazing situation, there's this great map and a notion of, it looks at every country in the world, and it says how much territory do the people in the country believe they have claim to beyond their borders. And the crazy thing is that, first of all, there's no country that thinks it has no more claim to territory beyond its borders. Every country believes it has claim to more territory. There's also a funny map that shows every country in Europe, how much it was at its greatest. Even Luxembourg was once, 5 times the size of what it is today. So every country believes it has claims to territory beyond what it has. And every normal movement of self-determination accepted that it's not going to have every single territory that it wants to have. So in that respect, I think the brilliance of Zionism and the reason that it was successful is that it always prioritized self-determination, the ability to govern ourselves in our own political entity in the land of Israel, which is the broad area. Sometimes people tell me, settlers, I'm actually going to make the claim that the settlers are as secular as I am. Because someone once told me, a foreign diplomat, he said, the settlers, you can't talk to them. It's all about God. And I'm like, look, do you know that there is God land, land mentioned in the Bible in the Sinai, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, in areas A and B? And have you noticed the remarkable tendency of settlers to live in areas where the IDF controls and protects them? Which shows you that at the end of the day, even the settlers supposedly operating in the name of biblical land have submitted the settlement project to where the IDF actually controls. And I think this is also to the credit, where the IDF no longer controls, you will no longer see settlements. So at the end of the day, I think the brilliance of the Zionist movement...
Why is that secularism? That's secularism? That's defense. What's secular about that?
At the end of the day, with all due respect to the Bible, what determines is the IDF and not the Bible.
Bible is the ideal, but we have to do it through practicality.
Which is what I said. Everyone in the world is practical. Luxembourgians are practical. Everyone is practical, and this has been the brilliance of Zionism. The reason that Palestinianism has achieved nothing, and the reason why they are not a movement for self-determination, is because actual movements for liberation and self-determination ultimately are pragmatic and practical and understand that they will never have every strip of land ever mentioned in their kind of whatever they consider their golden age. Because Palestinianism is an ideology built on negation, it has never been able to make the practical and pragmatic choice to have something rather than ensure that the Jews have nothing. So this is where I view myself in many ways as the most Zionist, because Zionism, because it's a movement for liberation and self-determination, is a movement that ultimately prioritizes liberation, self-determination in the land over ownership of every square inch mentioned in biblical texts.
Okay. I mean, I would say that I don't know if that's, I'm not sure that that's like a, we're also practical. Part of being a religious Zionist is being religious and a Zionist. I mean, I agree with you deeply that Zionism is a movement of a certain amount of practicality, but as Herzl said, if you will it, it is no dream, and as Ben Gurion said, in being pragmatic in Israel is to believe in miracles. There's an element of pushing it forward. And by the way, I would say to you that the settler movement, people like myself, are very much trying to work within our government to turn our government towards our side. It's not like we don't care about the government. Quite the opposite. We try to elect our people. We try to educate our people. We try to bring, I bring politicians all the time to the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs, the Mearat Hamachpela, bringing them, connecting them to the story, teaching them about the history of Hebron. Hebron was Jewish until 1929 for thousands of years, and there was Jewish presence there. And so we're trying very hard to teach. And you're totally like, one time I was in a debate with a kibbutznik, with a kibbutz member, and I said to him, I don't know why you're arguing with me so much. You're my father. You're my father and mother. I learned everything from you. It's just that I also added a kippah on my head, but holding on to the land, fighting back the terrorists or the fedayeen or whatever it is, farming, agriculture, loving the land, singing the songs of the land. Like, we learned it all from you. You gave us an awakening, certainly in terms of the physical aspect of the land of Israel. We just added another level to it. And he said to me,
one big difference.
Yeah,
that had to, the kibbutzniks did it under foreign rule. And this is where I go. The Settlement Project is doing it under Israeli Defense Forces rule. And this is the part where I say you can't play the games that were played under the Ottoman Empire of Homa and Migdal with your own military, which is why I say ultimately bring the decision to the Knesset, no Homa and Migdal against the Israeli military. What the kibbutzniks did with the Ottoman Empire, and ultimately the British, which really built the state. When you do it with the Israeli Defense Forces, then I'm sorry, then this is more of, as they talk about Columbia and Harvard, this is cosplay. We are now at a point where these decisions have to be made in the Knesset. Look, right. I'm the first person abroad to explain why settlements are not the reason we don't have peace. It's easy right. to make the empirical case, and I make that case. I show again and again that settlements are not the reasons why Arabs rejected peace and sovereignty again and again. That's an easy case to make. But precisely because I make the case, I say then this becomes a domestic Israeli issue. And within the domestic Israeli issue, I think the fundamental rule should be that the decision has to be taken in the Israeli Knesset, and settlements should only take place after there's annexation. Same, I'm not against Israel annexing part of Gaza's territory. I think that the notion that Gaza should remain with the same territory after what they did on October 7th should not be taken as an immediate assumption. The only, and I think this is the reason we also have problems of distrust in Israel, is that I want to know that the people in government understand that any such decision will have to be placed to a vote. And then, I am partial to the territory being used for potato fields for berry, but whatever. But it first has to be put to the vote in the Knesset, and only then you can go and settle properly. And all the games of Choma and Migdal in the middle of the night should be relegated to the history books and the Ottoman Empire and British rule.
I just want to remind you, by the way, that Gaza was originally settled by the state of Israel. You're right, under the British before 1948, but later again in the 70s under the Golda Meir regime, which the government took that stand to settle Gaza in order to break it apart from the terrorism, the famous five-finger plan. So, like the Gaza territory was settled by the government, not by Choma Migdal games. The government did it, right? And even today, the government. And wait a minute.
Then I think the vote.
Even today, the government. It's not always votes of Knesset. Sometimes you have an elected government, and sometimes the various ministries do their actions. Right now, 22 more communities were legalized in Judea and Samaria. They are being legalized. These places are being legalized. I live in Gush Etzion. Have you been to Gush Etzion?
What you call legalized is very different. They are not part of the state of Israel. And I remind you, a government fell because these various games and arrangements that are trying to avoid an actual proper decision. Look, Israel, personally, I think it was a terrible decision. I grew up in Jerusalem. I think annexing 32 Arab villages and calling them United Jerusalem Forever was a disaster. I grew up in the city where the reigning joke was that Olmert finally realized Teddy Kollek's plan to reunite the two parts of the city, because now the western part of Jerusalem looks as dirty as the eastern part of Jerusalem. But I grew up in that city, and I think it was a disastrous decision. But it was made as an actual decision. There was proper annexation, and people who live in neighborhoods that are within the municipal boundaries of Jerusalem know that even if no one else recognizes it, they know that they're living in an area that the government sees as part of Israel. So this is my only argument. Annexation before settlement. Really simple.
I want to buttress your point from a Torah perspective for a second, and say that I believe very firmly that there's a deep truth in what you're saying, not just about settlements, but about our behavior in general. And make the point like this. When we're in the diaspora, we the Jewish people live in diaspora, in the foreign court, we behave like Yaakov, biblically. Yaakov is wily, clever, uses wit to navigate within the foreign court and to exist and to survive, like Mordechai, like Yosef, like Yaakov even himself in Pharaoh's court, kind of just knowing how to navigate, knowing how to give the right present, knowing how to to be clever, and it's a bit of a snaky kind of path in order to navigate a hostile area. However, when you come to the land of Israel, when you're the sovereign, you have to transition between Yaakov to Yisrael. And Yisrael comes from the word Yashar El, straight to God, straight. You got to be the sovereign. You got to declare things with clarity. Stop playing around. This is your land. Say it's your land. And I'll give you many. I have especially 3 big examples of how Israel could play it much straighter. Your example is, you want to annex Judea and Samaria? Annex Judea and Samaria. Make it clear. This is what we're doing. And here's, you and I could disagree about what rights and obligations Arabs have. I would say residency. You would say full citizenship. Okay, we could disagree, but put it to a vote in the Knesset and speak it out with clarity. I'll give you a few other examples. With regard to conversion. The conversion process is very tricky to navigate it because there's no clarity. Israel doesn't lay out a clarity. I say, make it clear. This is how long it's going to take. It's going to be hard, but here's the tests. Here's what's approved. It's going to be 2-year process. We're going to work you like boot camp. But you can, at the end of this process, this is what it looks like. Today, it's not like that. You have to figure it out. It's all kind of tricky. It's not laid out clearly. And I'll give a third third example, and that is the army or national service. Everybody's got a different deal. The Hesder people go this way. The ultra-Orthodox go this way. Some of the secular people go this way. The Arabs go this way. I say, let's unify it. 2 years service for everybody, boys and girls, Haredi and secular and Arab. Everybody does 2 years, but you could do national service. You have to come out with a 2 year with a card that says, I did national service. That's it. There's no games. I don't care who you are. There's no more games. Do it with clarity. And part of part of Israel is in part a British country, in part a Russian Soviet country, in part a Turkish and Sephardic and Mizrahi and Arab kind of country. It's a hodgepodge. And so sometimes we still continue to exist in this Yacovian way instead of laying things out clearly. I agree with you. I would love for the state of Israel to say, what are you talking about? This is our land. Here's how Arabs and other people can live here. Here's what we deem terrorism, not terrorism. Here's how you're going to lose your residency or in your case, citizenship. And here's how you're going to get upward mobility and decency and opportunity. Speak with clarity because you're the sovereign now. You're not, as you said, kibbutz folks under the Turkish or British mandate.